Great. So welcome everyone to the opening lecture of the Center for Children and Families Spring Lecture Series. It's our 15th year of lectures. So thank you all for coming. I'm Margaret Owen. I'm the director of the Center for Children and Families. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you who are in the lobby, not in the lobby anymore, who are with us virtually, and those of you here in the classroom. So this year we are doing all of our lectures hybrid, which is fortunate because it's given us the opportunity to bring Dr. Andres Bustamante here, not literally, but here virtually from the University of California at Irvine. So it's my pleasure to introduce him to you. Dr. Bustamante received his doctorate from the University of Miami, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at Temple University, where he worked with a longtime colleague and friend of mine, and we continue to work together. Now, let me tell you that since 2018, he has been an assistant professor in the School of Education at the University of California at Irvine. And he is, let me see if I can get this out accurately. He directs at UC Irvine the Social, Iterative, Engaged, and Meaningful, or STEM Learning Lab. He's going to tell you all about that. As you will hear, he's very actively involved in the design and implementation of play-based early childhood STEM interventions that take place where children and families are found. Parks, schools, libraries, maybe, bus stops, which is exciting, and we might hear about a laundromat, I'm not sure. His work is gaining important recognition, and he's received funding from the National Science Foundation, the Heising-Simmons Foundation, and the American Educational Research Association, or AERA. In 2021, he received the Association for Psychological Sciences Rising Star Award for Early Career Scholars. His current funding includes two major grants, one from NSF, the National Science Foundation, to develop and test iterative videos to enhance children's science learning, and starting early this year, one from the LEGO Foundation to implement and evaluate a play-based early elementary school coaching model. It's a 4-state endeavor that will also have a site here in Dallas. Andres is very interested in research that has practical implications for life success for children and families, especially those from underserved communities. Just a word about questions. If you're on Teams, feel free to post your questions in the chat, and you can raise your hand in here. Andres will let you know how he wants to handle those questions, and we'll make this go as smoothly as possible. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bustamante.
Thank you. Okay, let me see if I can share my screen here. Can y'all see my screen now? Yeah, okay, awesome. Yeah, okay, so thank you for the lovely introduction and for inviting me to present with your community. I was loving looking at those pictures and all the amazing work and the students and teachers that y'all are engaging. It's very excited to connect. As Professor Owen said, I'm Andres, and I direct the STEM Learning Lab at UC Irvine, the School of Education. And STEM does have the traditional meaning of science, technology, engineering, and math. But we're also really focused on what makes high quality learning situations and learning situations that create that are fun and playful and generative for children and families. And so the STEM has a double meaning, again, towards these kind of high quality learning goals. So the S besides science also stands for social. So learning situations where kids can do things together, collaboratively as a group, and learn how to work as a team. Iterative, meaning that each time you return to a learning situation, you can ask a new question, engage in a new way. So kind of that inquiry cycle, that iterative kind of learning that comes in science learning. Engaged, meaning hands-on and minds-on and active. And then meaningful, meaning that it's connected to families, children and the families' values, culture, things that they care about, things that they're interested in. So it's not the opposite of meaningful basically would be arbitrary. And so in my lab, we design play spaces, everyday spaces uh, for early childhood science, technology, engineering, and math learning, but also that try to strive towards these principles for high quality learning from developmental science. And so I'm going to share two projects with you today. One is in public spaces, city spaces, parks, bus stops, grocery stores, laundromats, and the other one is in a school. And so for this first one, we cite the statistic very often that young kids spend 80% of their waking hours, not even counting sleeping time, outside of school. So school, I do a lot of work in school. I've been a science coach in Head Start centers, and I'm working in elementary schools now. Um, but also kids spend a lot of time outside of school. So how can we try to enrich that outside of school space to provide these kind of high quality learning situations and environments? And so Playful Learning Landscapes is a series of projects that endeavors to do just this. Um, uh, Essentially, we're designing everyday spaces, bus stops, grocery stores, parks, and playgrounds to have um, play and learning installations akin to what you would see at a children's museum, but out in community spaces, specifically in communities who don't traditionally have access to these informal STEM learning environments like museums and zoos. And there's a lot of barriers for families to get to those places. And some museums and zoos do a fantastic job of creating that accessibility, but still there's challenges like transportation and paying admissions fees and even knowing that they're there. And then when you're there, do you feel welcomed and you feel like this is the place for you? And so we're trying to take some of those rich informal learning spaces and bring them right into the community. And so right now I have a project from the National Science Foundation where we are partnering with this community organization in Santa Ana, California called SALE. And SALE stands for the Santa Ana Early Learning Initiative. And you can see them pictured here, this big happy group right here. It's now I think a couple hundred members, local parents, teachers, nonprofit organizations, local city government, a coalition of people coming together to support families with kids 0 to 9. So it has a really an early childhood focus. And in partnership with SALE, we are designing playful learning landscapes installations for Santa Ana that reflect the local community values, culture, goals, history, what they want to see for their public spaces, essentially. And in order to do that, we've had a series of community co-design sessions. And these sessions started over Zoom because this grant was funded in spring 2020. So I don't know if y'all remember, but there was a rather important historical event at that time where we all had to be inside of our homes for a long period. So we ended up doing the first year of co-design over Zoom, but we still tried to make it fun and engaging. So we did things like we shipped arts and crafts materials to people's houses and then had them log on Zoom and had them build prototypes of things that they would want to see at their park or in their bus stop. Or we'd have them go out and take a picture of a place in their community that they love to go with their kids. And then they would come in and we would tell stories about, okay, what's your picture? Where is it? What's a fond memory that you have? Like, why'd you pick that place? Like, what's meaningful about that place? And through these stories and these design activities, we surfaced many themes relevant to this specific community. And so through those to sort of a thematic analysis, we generated these themes and we used those to create design prototypes. And then we actually built little mock-ups of the prototypes and brought them back to the community, to this community center. And we had families come in with their kids and play with the different prototypes and then give feedback and kind of iterate on them. And so it's been a really fun process over the last couple years. These are some of the community cultural values that surfaced during these co-design sessions. So families were really clear that they wanted experiences that were going to bring the family together and that were going to have them kind of learning as a family and even intergenerationally. So they told great stories about how, sometimes their kids will teach things to them or even their, grandparents about technology or about, sometimes they'll speak English and the grandparents don't speak English. And so there's learning in that direction. And then obviously the elders and the grandparents teach things to the kids because they have such a wealth of knowledge. And so families really love this idea of intergenerational learning and learning together to collaboratively as a family. They also love the idea of their community culture and history being represented. And this could be through flags, through art, through stories, through patterns, all different kinds of ways, through foods, that they feel like they're represented in their culture and history because they really want to pass that on to their kids. Especially, it's a very high proportion of immigrant families, and so sometimes they feel like their kids lose that connection with their home country, and so they want to try to foster and inspire that with these designs. And lastly, families wanted things that were attractive, so that they're bright and colorful and really called kids' attention, and something that when you look at the public spaces in your community, you feel proud of that. So families reflected a lot, and that in Santa Ana, it's not always a beautiful place to look at. Sometimes, densely populated urban environment. Sometimes that, graffiti and things like that. And so they wanted something that they could say, look at that, that's my community, and I'm really proud of it. And ultimately they wanted to feel safe and relaxed when they're in these community spaces. And so these were like just a handful of community goals that we designed for. And then we combine those goals with our principles from developmental science. So very much like the lab name that I told you about, we wanted to make learning installations that are active, social, joyful, meaningful, and iterative. And then also we had science learning goals with this project. It's funded by the National Science Foundation, after all. So we use the next generation science standards, scientific practices, and cross-cutting concepts as design goals. So we thought, how can we have kids making observations, asking questions, making predictions, noticing patterns, noticing cause and effect relationships? And so with these kind of three buckets of goals, the community cultural values, the learning principles, and our science learning goals, those were kind of like a guiding framework for all of our designs. And so any one design prototype isn't going to check all of these boxes, but the more boxes that it's checking, probably the higher quality design you're going to end up with. So the more community cultural values that you're uplifting, and the more that it's adhering to your learning principles, and the more science learning opportunities, the happier we are with the designs. And this was the parents and us and the kids, everyone was looking at these design goals and designing for them explicitly. So it wasn't like we just heard the values from the parents and then we brought the science stuff. It was like we all did it together collaboratively. And so we've written a couple of papers with students about this design process, about starting with understanding community values, and then doing this thematic analysis to surface themes and values, and then translating that to design, and then having families building the design and then bringing it back to families and have them kind of play test and iterate. And then another paper about how we kind of balance the cultural values with the learning goals, and specific with Latino families, how we kind of navigated that process. And so this is another great student, amazing student who is leading this paper about a conceptual model about this design process. But yeah, I'll show you some of the prototypes, things that we have designed. We spent the last almost 3 years now, 2.5 years designing these things. And now we're working with fabricators who are actually building them. And so these designs are going to be up in Santa Ana this summer. But for now, they're just design pictures, but I still think they're very exciting. This first one is called the Abacus Bus Stop, and this bus stop came from stories that families told growing up, and many of the families were from Mexico, but other countries in South and Central America. But it was a really common thing that families said that they learned math as kids using the abacus. That was a really common tool that families felt familiar with. And so we thought, could we make a giant abacus and give ideas for kids and families to count things while they wait for the bus, like how many cars have gone by since you've been here, or how old are you, and how old is your abuela, and how old are you combined, or, how many leaves can you collect in 30 seconds, or, all different types of things you can count. And we're going to give prompts for families to give them ideas of things they can count. Um, this other bus stop design is called the Loteria bus stop. So Loteria is a really popular game in Santa Ana. It's kind of like bingo. Loteria is kind of like bingo, but basically you spin this wheel and you get an icon, and then you have your Loteria card. And the idea is when you get an icon, you flip it over and you want to get 4 in a row or all the corners. But then on the back of the card, we're putting in prompts to give families math and science learning activities to do while they play the game. So it's kind of like embedding that playful science learning and math learning into this game. And the beauty of it is because families already know this game, it's really popular. They don't need instruction. So one of the biggest design challenges in these installations is you can't have long paragraphs about how this game works. Like nobody's going to read that or figure that out. But when they see Loteria, they immediately know how to play. So there's no instructions needed, which really offloads a lot of the challenge of creating a usable design. And then also because it's a game that's very popular in the community, they feel ownership of it and they feel that it reflects, their community. And so we're hoping that will get foster lots of usage and engagement with the installation. We also did signage for the grocery store. So this sign came from families telling stories about these kind of intergenerational passed down ways of, knowing how to pick the food that you pick. How do you pick the right avocado or the right papaya or the right mango? And what we notice is that in these stories, there's so much rich science learning happening. Kids and families are using their senses to observe and compare and contrast and predict. And they're talking about, oh, if I want to get an avocado for today to make some guacamole, then I'm going to get one that's a little bit soft. So I'm going to feel it and see, okay, how's the texture? Or if I want to get one that lasts for like 2 weeks, then I need to get a really firm one, maybe a green one. Or so, sometimes some fruits you got to like bang on it and hear the sound, the pitch, or sometimes you got to smell it and it should smell a little sweet. Or so again, all this kind of these science practices and conversation happening already. And so this sign is meant to sort of uplift that and remind families that they can engage their kids in these conversations. And that's really rich learning opportunities. And then also the idea of leaving your tips and tricks for the next family to try to build community. This next sign is about conversion, and this came also from stories from immigrant families who moved to the United States from Mexico and Central America, and there was like 4 or 5 families who told very similar stories about having to order their food at the deli and having to order in pounds when they were used to kilos. And so they told funny stories about, ordering like twice as much food as they needed or not getting nearly enough. And, we all kind of laughed at it. It was a common experience, but I'm sure just for families, it's probably just frustrating at the time. Like, oh man, I got to go back to the store and get some more, ham. So this chart was created. It's going to have a little slider for families to be able to see the equivalency between kilos and pounds. And so it can foster conversations about units of measurement and systems of measurement and making predictions and converting between kilos and pounds. And also just be kind of a useful tool for families and something that kind of resonates with their experience. Families told us really loud and clear that Santa Ana doesn't have a ton of green open space, but it has a lot of walls. And so they were thinking like, how can we activate the wall space and really enrich those with learning value? And so here's one of our designs. It's called the I Spy mural. And so this is kind of like a Where's Waldo I Spy inspired design where there's these hidden objects within the mural. And so kids have to use their observation skills to find the hidden objects, and they end up using lots of spatial words like, oh, it's underneath or behind or beside or within. And they're using colors and they're comparing and they're contrasting and doing all this kind of rich conversation. And the whole image is designed with the families and the kids to represent Santa Ana. So these are a bunch of local landmarks, and you see the mariachi band, the paleta stand. These are all things that families requested very directly. It was really funny. The first iteration of this that the artist did, we brought it, and it was just like a stock bus, like a generic bus, and the kids almost immediately were like, what is that bus? That is not my bus. My bus looks like this. It's light blue. It has the orange strip on it. And like they described their bus to a T. And so we swapped it out for the Santa Ana buses. And families, the parents looked at it. And if you've ever seen like Where's Waldo, it's a lot of like people walking alone, and they're all in different orientations, like facing different directions. And the parents right away said, "Oh no, in Santa Ana, we don't walk alone. We walk together as a family." And so we went back to the artist and said, "Okay, can you put these family units walking together instead of people walking alone?" So it's just the idea that families really felt ownership over these designs, and really made them their own, made them it makes them meaningful to them in lots of different ways that you wouldn't necessarily notice just by looking at it. Um, this one started off as a mural, but now I think is going to be like a thin laser jet cut metal statue. But it's about measuring how tall you are in comparison to local native species from Southern California. And so you can, measure how tall you are versus a wolf or a bear, and then how high you can jump, and then for the animals up at the top, you're like doing counting on. So you're not starting from zero. To count that monkey, you got to start at 11 and go up to 13, so um, kids have to be able to count on from non-zero numbers. And so anyways, all types of measurement and math learning opportunities here. And also it's just like a fun, beautiful thing to look at. And we're gonna have little QR codes for kids to learn about these animals and different fun facts about them. So Oh, and yeah, speaking of the QR codes, we're also making a digital app that's going to go with these installations to keep them, again, iterative and update the content. And we're doing kind of like a Pokemon Go style thing where each installation has a character that lives in that installation. And when you meet the character, they have this dilemma. And when you help them resolve their dilemma, then they live in your phone. And then so like, for example, at the abacus, this abacus character would then give you your own abacus in your phone that you can decorate and personalize, and then you can go and count stuff wherever you're at. And so we had the kids, the Saley kids, design these characters and their backstories and their dilemmas that need resolution. And so, yeah, it's been a really fun process, and we're making really good headway on this app that's going to go with these installations. Um, and we have a variety of measurement and evaluation approaches planned. One is observing the language environment. So thinking about, okay, we did observations at this bus stop before we put in the abacus, and we heard, two math words and one spatial word and two conversational turns. And then we put the abacus and we heard 25 math words and 30 spatial words and 15 conversational turns. And so by doing that pre-post with the installation, you can get a real sense for how you've enriched the language environment, which there's a lot of research from developmental science that suggests that rich language environments produce learning and relate to kids' later learning. And then we're also going to be doing some more qualitative observations to observe the ways that our cultural design goals have been are manifested in the interaction. So, for example, if we design for intergenerational learning, like are we seeing, kids teaching their grandparents something or vice versa? And so anyways, how are these kind of design goals around culture and values being manifested at the interaction sites, at the installation sites? And then we're also surveying caregivers about their attitudes and beliefs about the connection between play and learning. Do they see opportunity for STEM learning in their everyday environments? Do they feel like they are a person who can teach STEM to their kids? And so we're hoping that seeing these installations at the bus stop, at the grocery store, at the playground, at their kids' school will kind of like empower them to say like, oh yeah, I can do this with my kids. And, not only can I do it at the grocery store, but, I can do it at home when we're cooking. And so can we like create that kind of confidence in parents where they can see these opportunities everywhere they go? And we're going to try to really measure that. So in Orange County, there's this data set called the Early Development Index, EDI data set, and it's collected by this organization, First Five Orange County, who's funded by tobacco taxes. And this organization collects school readiness data on every child in the county when they enter kindergarten. And so those data are de-identified, but they're mapped to kids' neighborhoods. And so we're doing our installations in this Madison Park neighborhood in Southeast Santa Ana. And so we're going to try to see longitudinally, can we like move the needle or have impact on neighborhood level school readiness by kind of creating this saturation or tipping point of playful learning installations and opportunities everywhere where families go. And so as next steps, we're starting to implement these things in Madison Park this summer. And then we're partnering with the city of Santa Ana to replicate and disseminate and grow these installations to other parts of the city. And then we also have a nonprofit partner, Playful Learning Landscapes Action Network, who's helping disseminate designs to other cities who are interested. And then the Brookings Institution has a global network of cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Tel Aviv, Israel, Lima, Peru, Santa Ana, and we meet quarterly and share kind of lessons learned about the playful learning initiatives that are happening in the different cities. So really hoping for scaling it from the local level all the way to international around the world. And so that's the goal, is to really have these designs be out there and have families playing with them all over the world and making them their own, designing them so it reflects their community and their values and their goals. And then the next project is transitioning a bit to the schoolyard. So when I moved to UCI in 2018, I had already been working on these playful learning landscapes projects with my mentor, Kathy Hirsch-Pasick, when I was a postdoc. And I was excited about bringing them to Santa Ana, but also about this idea of using the schoolyard as a testing ground to develop playful learning landscapes. And the schools have several really powerful affordances. So at schools, first of all, you know who the kids are and they come back every day. So that allows you to do things like give them an assessment, and then you know they're coming back, and you can do a pre and post assessment like on their learning. And then you also have access to teachers who are amazing at facilitating playful learning activities and designing playful learning activities that are really deeply connected to their students and how their students learn. And so I was really excited to partner with teachers and to use the schoolyard as a piloting ground. And one of the first projects that we've done in the schoolyard is this fraction ball project. And so in this project, you can see that we've redesigned the basketball court so kids can take shots that are worth a fraction of a point. So the traditional 3-point arc is now worth 1 whole point. And then there's smaller arcs closer to the basket that are worth a 1/4 point, a 1/2 point, and 3/4 of a point. And then the left side is decimal representations, and the right side is fraction representations. So kids can see that 1/4 and 0.25 are the same value, just written in different notation. And then on the other side of the court, it's thirds. So here's fourths and the other side is thirds. So kids can see that all a fraction is a whole divided into equal parts, and the denominator tells you how many parts that is. And so the way that kids learn fractions is very procedural oftentimes. And so this kind of more conceptual approach that's very physical and embodied, and they can see the magnitude of fractions very concretely. And then there's a number line on the side of the court for them to keep track of their score. So this draws really heavily on math cognition research about number line training and embodied learning. And it's just fun. Like, who doesn't want to go play basketball during math class, right? That matters a lot, I think. So kind of the origin story for how Fraction Ball was born is I went to this charter school in Santa Ana called El Sol Academy. It's a dual immersion charter school. And I met with their principal, and I told her about playful learning landscapes, and she was really excited. And she was like, "Okay, you should meet with my teachers. Like, they're going to be so excited to hear about this." And I said, "All right, cool." So I met with the teachers, and in my head, in my researcher brain, I was thinking like, "Okay, I'm going to go meet with these teachers. I'm going to get them excited about these ideas, and then maybe we'll like put together a grant proposal, and we'll submit it, and maybe it'll get funded for the following year, but usually grant proposals take a couple tries. Usually submit it, gets rejected, you get feedback, you submit it again. So I'm thinking like maybe in like 2 years is when we'll have some funding to really do something cool." And so I told the teachers about these concepts, and they were like, okay, this is awesome. Let's start. What should we do first? Let's start tomorrow. And I was kind of like, oh, tomorrow. Okay, that I love the enthusiasm, but I was not thinking about that. But I didn't want to lose that momentum. And I said, okay, well, let's do it. Let's start tomorrow. What should we do first? And one of the teachers said, well, we just repaved our basketball court, but we haven't painted any lines on it yet. So could we do anything there? And I immediately got so excited because I've been playing basketball from when I was a little kid all the way through college. I love basketball. It's my favorite thing to do. I still play in the old man leagues. And so I got super excited and I was like, yeah, let's do something with basketball. And then we started talking with the teachers about what are some big problems of practice or challenges that they're experiencing. And they really raise fractions as um, a critical point where a lot of kids start saying stuff like, I'm not a math person, or, math's not for me. And it's because fractions change a lot of the rules about math. Right up until fractions, bigger number always means more value, right? But with fractions, a bigger denominator means a smaller value. So like there's all these very different rules that happen and that really are really challenging for kids. And so we ended up through a lot of iteration and back and forth conversation and design with teachers with this design that I explained. And we created these scripted games where there's a shooter who takes the shot, a rebounder who collects the ball, passes it back, and then calls out the value of the shot, and then the counter over on the number line who walks on the number line to keep their score. And so the first game is called Rapid Fire. So this is like each shooter gets 1 minute to make as many shots as you can, and you just gotta try to see who can get the most. Make It Count is another game where this time each team gets a preset number of shots, let's say 10 shots. And in the beginning, kids are just taking whatever shots they want. They're not thinking too much about it. But then as you get towards the end of your 10 shots, you're like, okay, I'm down 2.5 points and I only have 4 shots left. Like, okay, I got to think, like, what shots do I need to try to catch up? Or the other team might say, okay, what shots do I need to try to get out of range? Because they only have 2 shots left and I'm up, 1.5. So if I get over 2 holes, I know they can't catch up, right? Because the larger shot is 1 hole. And so it's just a little bit more planful and a little more strategic. And then the last game is called Exactly. And that's where the teacher calls out an exact number, like 3.25. And then the winner of the game is not the one who gets the most points, but the one who gets to exactly 3.25. So again, in the beginning, you're just taking whatever shot you want. But as you approach your goal, you have to think, how do we get to exactly 3.25? So if you're at 3 holes and you take a half-point shot, well, then you just passed up your goal and you lose automatically. So again, it's a little bit more planful and a little bit more strategic. And then we also made a rule that whenever the teacher calls out the word flip, that the fraction side jumps to the decimal side and the decimal side jumps to the fraction side. And it's to get kids to think about these conversions and equivalency of fractions and decimals. And so we did, once we had this first design, we did an experiment, a randomized control trial where we had about 70 kids, 5th and 6th graders, and we randomly assigned half of them to play fraction ball during PE class and the other half to stay in PE business as usual. And we gave them a math packet of a kind of representative battery of fraction and decimal questions. And the first time we found that kids got better at converting between fractions and decimals, but not too much else. And so we went back to the teachers and we asked them like, okay, how do you think that went? Like what worked and what can we improve and how can we make it better? And one of the big things that teachers told us was the kids are just walking on the number line. They're not saying the math out loud. So we're not really sure if they're getting it, right? And so we made a new rule that to move down the number line, you have to say the number sentence out loud. You have to say 1/2 plus 1/4 equals 3/4, and then they can walk down the number line. We also had items where kids were estimating on a number line, like a 0 to 1 or 0 to 5 blank number line, and kids didn't get better at that. And we thought, okay, that makes sense because they didn't practice that in the game. And so we made a new game called the Fraction Ball Ghost, where we, instead of using the regular number line, we used chalk to make a ghost number line that has a 0 on the bottom and a 5 on the top. And then in those games, it's not the team with the most points who wins, but the one who most accurately estimates their score on the ghost number line. And so if I have 2.25 and you have 3.75, I could still win if I estimate my 2.25 more accurately than you. And we were able to we made the number line 5 meters, so we could actually measure absolute value from their prediction from where they put the chalk mark on the number line. And then we also wanted them to be exposed to different kinds of fractions that weren't represented on the court, like improper fractions or mixed numbers. So like 12/4 or 1 3/4. And so we added a rule called supercharge, where at any time the teacher can call out supercharge points, and then they yell out 12/4, and the students on the number line get to try to add that number to their score. And if they get it right, they get to keep the points. And if they don't, they got to go back to where they were. So anyways, thinking fun ways to integrate these kind of different number representations, which weren't included on the court. And so after making these iterations, then we did another study with 160 students, same design, randomly assigned during PE class in the same pre and post test math battery. And this time we found these black dots of the second study, and these little stars mean that there was a significant impact on fraction ball in the treatment group compared to the control group. So we found like a 0.4 effect size, which is like a pretty moderate effect size. In education research, that's really good. 0.4 is like a really big impact in education studies. And so on the overall, kids got better on the overall fraction battery, and it still seemed like conversions were the biggest impact. Something about having the decimals and the fractions really right next to each other, I think is really helpful for kids, especially on the number line. And so we published this study in Journal of Educational Psychology, and then we used that data to then go and get a grant from the EF Plus Math program to scale this game across the Santa Ana Unified School District. And we also partnered with teachers and students in Santa Ana Unified to design connections between the game on the court and in the classroom, and then also make tweaks and iterations to the game out on the court to make it more fun and have more learning value. And so some examples of the classroom activities that we designed with the teachers and the students is like watching LA Sparks or LA Laker games during math class and pausing after a Candace Parker fadeaway jump shot and saying, okay, what would that be worth on a fifths court or an eighths court or a thirds court? And then having kids actually keep track of the shots and then add them up. And then we also added a role out on the court called the reporter. So there's a kid out there with a diagram of the court who's keeping track of all the shots that were taken and where they were missed and where they were made. And then so they're collecting data out on the court. And then when they come back in the class, they analyze the data to make strategy decisions for the next time they go on the court. They say, okay, we took all these shots from the whole point, but nobody made those shots. But when we took shots from the quarter point, look, we made like almost all our points from that. So like, what should we do next time? And so again, thinking about meaningful ways to engage kids in math learning and doing this kind of fraction decimal arithmetic, but in a way that's kind of relevant to them and useful, it provides useful information. And so after creating the classroom curriculum, we did another experiment, this time with 16 teachers and about 340 students. And this time we had a classroom component and the PE component. So the some classes did fraction ball during math and PE time, and then other classes did business as usual, whatever they were doing already in math class and now in PE. And this time you can see here these black dots. We got impacts on like almost everything we measured. So the overall score, similar impact of like a 0.4 effect size. And we also got, kids got better at number line estimation. They got better at fraction and decimal addition, timed and untimed. They still the conversion effects were really big. Those are the biggest effects. But yeah, really excited about these results. And now we are going back to the teachers and trying to make the games even better and more usable for work scaling across the district in the next 2 years. I also have a student who made a video game version, which is so cool. Essentially, it's a measure of executive function in the context of math. And so it's kind of like a measure of planning and math. And so we collected the Tower of London or Tower of Hanoi, which is a planning task, and math and the math packets, and the kids did this video game, and we found good correlations between all three, and so that was exciting. So the trying to make a digital version which has different affordances and different learning opportunities. And we also measured kids' motivation and attitudes and beliefs towards math. So we asked them with these emojis, like, are you excited about math? Are you nervous about math? Are you frustrated by math? Are you hopeful by math? And what we found is that the kids in the fraction ball condition were more hopeful and had more positive emotions overall about math, and they were less bored. So that was exciting for me. I was very proud of that because fun is like my top priority in all these interventions and installations. So that was exciting data. And then we're also doing a whole number version for kindergarten, first and second graders, where it's the same game essentially, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of fractions. And then they add their numbers, they add their score on a whole number line. And so we did a first round pilot of this study, and we found that it worked really well for kindergartners, and it worked for first graders who were lower ability level at pretest. And it didn't work so much for second graders or more advanced first graders, because basically it was too easy for them. They had already kind of mastered the content that we were assessing them on and that the game included, which was just whole number addition, basically. And so now we're going back with the teachers and thinking about ways to make it more challenging for those older kids. So maybe we'll put a golden ball that multiplies your score, or a red ball that subtracts your score, or so all different kind of tweaks and iterations that we're going to make to this game. And so next steps, we're going to be scaling across the Santa Ana Unified School District. Next year, we're going to do 1,000 student RCT in about 15 schools. And then in 2 years, we're going to do a 10,000 student RCT across the entire district, 36 elementary schools. So that's going to be really exciting and a lot of work. And then there's other school districts that are looking to get involved. Really exciting, La Liga Nacional de Baloncesto Profesional, which is the professional basketball league in Mexico, reached out because they want to use fraction ball as a community outreach and community engagement tool or program. They do these camps for young kids. And so we're going to do a pilot in Oaxaca, Mexico this summer, which I'm so excited about. So that's going to be amazing. And then I have these videos. This video on the right here is kids in the Netherlands playing a soccer version of fraction ball that they did with chalk. I'm going to try to play it. But I do remember the person in the beginning saying that he was worried that the audio was going to be really loud. So maybe brace for a very loud audio. Let's just get ready for that. Let's see. Can y'all hear that? No? Okay. That's okay. Maybe it's better that way. Anyways, the audio is nice because they're speaking Dutch. You don't know what they're saying, but they're very excited. Like they're yelling and laughing and jumping, and you can tell it's a very high energy environment, which is pretty cool to see, because this is math class. Yeah, there you go. So there's the game winning play right there. And then this other video is in Kosovo. So I have a collaborator, a colleague named Krejnik Begoli, who's from Kosovo, and he brought this to schools in Kosovo, and they painted an indoor court for the first time. And actually, there was a really cool kind of a design tweak that they did. The kids in Kosovo were not making a lot of shots, and because I guess they more play soccer there, they don't play a lot of basketball. And so one of the PE teachers hung a hula hoop over the rim. So now all you have to do is throw the ball through the hula hoop. You don't have to make it in the hoop. So that made them like make way more shots. And so I thought that was a genius kind of adaptation. And we've adopted that now in Santa Ana. We do the hula hoop thing because it just makes kids make more points. And so it's more math, more fun. It's kind of a win-win. But yeah, you can again, they're speaking Albanian, so you wouldn't be able to understand them. But you can see the kids over in the number line. They're jumping up and down. They're counting. They're running. They're celebrating. It's kind of like a March Madness math class. So just really exciting to see the enthusiasm and the joy that kids are getting from learning this really difficult math content that kids traditionally struggle with. I'll stop there because I'd love to engage in some conversation. But first, I just want to give a huge shout out to my colleagues, collaborators, students, funders. This is an immense amount of work. And it takes a big team. There's no way anybody can do this on their own. So just wanted to shout that out. And yeah, it's been a great experience learning from all these brilliant folks. And then finally, an invitation to all of you. So every time I share this work and these projects, it's because I get really excited to share, because I love the idea of people taking these ideas and making them their own and engaging their own communities. And so this is an official invitation to all of y'all to start dreaming, playful learning in all the spaces that you go. And I think maybe I have to apologize, because sometimes when you turn on this lens or this way of seeing the world, like you can't get away from it. Like you're going to see it everywhere you go. Every wall you look at, every grocery store you walk into, you're like, oh, we could do this thing. And so just, embrace it and have fun with it. And yeah, if you ever want support or want to learn about more ideas, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect, because like I said, my goal is to see this stuff happen all over the world. So okay, let me see if I can stop sharing now so I can see y'all. Let's try.
Dr. Bustamante, thank you for a wonderful talk. My name is Megan Swanson. I am co-hosting the event for CCF with Margaret Owen. And we have a couple questions in the chat, and then we have a bunch of people in the room here that I can help moderate for you. So, but I actually wondered if I could take the pleasure of asking the first question, which is a little bit higher level of a question for you. And it was really remarkable to me, the multiple levels at which you really partnered with the teachers. And I'm wondering if you can just share with the group some of what you really view as like the key ingredients to those partnerships to make them be so rich and enduring.
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. So teachers and students are an amazing driver of these projects, of the innovation and of the usability. But teachers are busy. They're so busy and they have so much on their plate. And so they're not always excited about investing their time in any old project. So they really have to believe that this is something valuable and important for their students. But when they do see it, they're all in and they're amazing. And so some of the things that we try to do early on to build relationships, first of all, we show up with donuts every single time, and that never hurts. So anytime we meet with teachers, we have a box of, and they're not just regular old donuts either. They're like artisan, fancy hipster kind of donuts. And so the first thing we do is show up with donuts. We share a little bit about ourselves. We talk together, and then we really try to immediately go out on the court and play, because it's one thing to hear about fraction ball or playful learning and to like, trust me, kids love it. Take my word for it, right? But it's another thing when you're out there and you're on the court and you're actually playing. Like teachers, like even the teachers who are a little skeptical at first, they're like, "What? You want me to play during math class?" Like I have standards to hit. Like there's state testing. Like we need to be ready for that. But then you go out on the court and you have them play, and we make the teachers to be the kids first, and then we act as the teachers. And when they're out there and they're doing the math, arithmetic, and they're playing, they're having fun, they're laughing, they kind of see like, oh, my kids are gonna love this. And then when they take the leap to actually try it with their students and they see the kind of joy and engagement, they buy in pretty quick. And then they're like, hey, when's our next meeting? I have an idea. Like I saw this, I want to try this thing in the classroom, I want to do this. And so it really is, we put a lot of work and effort into making sure that our teacher partners feel heard and feel valued. And when they give us amazing ideas, we use them and we communicate back how we're using them. And when we do these studies and then we ask them to fill out surveys for us or go do activities, we make sure we meet with them and we debrief and say, okay, how did it go? What happened? And we share the data back and look, this is where kids are learning. This is where there wasn't. Like, how can we tweak the games? How can we revise and iterate? And so we're really invested in that partnership. And I think it comes across and they realize that. And so even though they're busy and even though they have a lot going on, they're willing to make the time or protect the time because they really do think that this has value for their students.
Wonderful. Thank you. So maybe I'll see if anybody in the room here with us has a question. And for the folks that are joining virtually, keep putting those questions in the chat. Okay. Y'all just, oh, yep, we got one question. And why don't you shout it out and then I can reiterate it if it's not quite heard, okay?
Okay. I was just wondering, like regarding the participants, right, the students, was there any consideration regarding like learning disabilities or other like cognitive disorders? Good question.
Yeah.
Were you able to
I
hear
have a good
that?
question. Yeah. Like,
Okay.
so intentionally, when we created our teacher partnerships, design partnerships, we didn't just do math teachers. We also engage with PE teachers, with special education teachers, curriculum specialists. And so we tried to design for a variety of users, including kids with physical disabilities, kids with learning disabilities, do a language learn. So Santa Ana is like almost 60% English language learners. And so we try to be really thoughtful about that. And what we've really heard from special education teachers throughout is like, this is what they do. Like, this is like exactly the kind of like approach that really works well for kids with dyscalculia or like a learning disability. And because it's like physical, it's like hands-on, it's active. They did say that like we wouldn't bring out, a whole classroom. We would bring like 3 or 4 kids to make it a little bit slower pace, but the court, it can be used for that. And so we did have a variety of design partners to try to create for this, but ultimately what we really ended up hearing from teachers who have expertise there is like, this is actually how we approach things. And then, of course, with adaptations, like maybe if there's a kid with a physical disability who can't throw the ball up in the hoop, maybe you have them roll it on the ground instead of, like PE teachers are amazing at making these adaptations to make the physical experience more engaging and inclusive, I guess is the word I was looking for. But yeah, great question.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else from the audience? Yep, go ahead.
So my question is kind of split into two. So I was wondering how countries like Mexico, Albania, and the Netherlands have like heard about these programs. And what is your goal to, reach out to more countries and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So, so the Mexican Basketball League, I think they read a blog. So I'm really, I try to be intentional about writing blogs and not just writing to academic audiences, but broader audiences, because I really do think that these ideas, you don't need a PhD to understand that this is cool and fun and you could do this. And in fact, people with PhDs are probably not as good as getting them to actual kids. And so I try to like write blogs, and disseminate to more public facing audiences. And so I think the Mexican Basketball League, they saw a blog that I wrote and they reached out. And then one of the Kosovo was a collaborator I have who's from there. And then the Netherlands, the charter school where we invented fraction ball, a Soul Academy, they have this group of teachers from the Netherlands who come visit every year. And so they saw it during their visit and they're like, oh, we want to do this, but with soccer, because, in the Netherlands, everybody plays soccer. And so it's a great example of like the ways that it's really exciting for me that people take these ideas and then run with them and make them their own. And yeah, I'm excited about dissemination and as big a scale as I can pull off. And so we do have some strategic partnerships like the Brookings Institution, which is a policy kind of think tank, and they do a lot of dissemination work and advocacy. And so we're partnering with them to try to share these designs. And there's been like playful learning landscapes in South Africa and Kenya. And I think there's a group in China doing something. And I was in Bogota, Colombia in November, and I was like sparking up conversations there. And so I'm excited to see this stuff go all over the world.
Thanks. Yeah, Jackie, absolutely.
I'm wondering about red tape. Like, I'm wondering about just the challenges of working both at the city level and then a school district level. Could you share any of that, just the logistics of getting started, getting approval, getting buy-in and stuff?
Yeah, oh my gosh, amazing question. So important and such a hard one. So the red tape is so real. What I found, I'd say like you know, because we don't have, I could do a whole nother hour talk on just the navigating these institutions and systems, but I'll just like boil it down to what I think is the magic sauce or something, is that I think that city officials and school districts, respectively, the city officials see and recognize the deep and meaningful partnerships that we have with families, and they take that very seriously. So they view their charge as public servants to serve their constituents. And when they see that we've spent 2 years designing with community members, and they can see very concretely how our designs reflect the local community, they take that seriously, and it opens doors. And so like we had a really close partner in the city who was part of our design process, who was from Parks and Rec, and he retired like right before we were like right in the middle of our project. And we were like, oh my gosh, Ron, like what are we gonna do without you? And somebody new came in the city. And so this is very common, this kind of turnover. And so, and we kind of like, we're out like flapping in the wind for a little bit. And we're like, is this gonna work out? And so we ended up reaching out to a city council member and going to meet with them. And when I met with them, we had 7 families show up and be like, hey, this is our project. We need you to make this happen. If you're going to be our city council for our ward, we need you to make this project happen. And so then I went to meet with the new director of Parks and Rec, and the city council member was like, hey, this is the project for my community. This needs to, like, let's make this thing happen. And so again, like being able to navigate these roadblocks, which inevitably come, I think the partnership and the like, another example, the city is doing a new park, and they do like these public forums where they invite anybody to come and like share what they think should happen in the new park. And usually nobody comes to these sessions. It's just like 2 people from the city. Well, this session that we did had like 32 people, and 29 of them were like the families that we've been designing with. And then it was me and these 2 people from the city. And so like the people from the city are like, all right, like we put an open call, and like 30 of you are from the same group working on the same thing. Like, yeah, so let's use it. So the city's doing a new park, and they're going to use several of our designs because the community advocated for that. And so those aren't things that I can do as a researcher, but through this partnership, I feel like that has made, and the same thing goes with the district. They know when their teachers are involved and invested, they can sense that, and it helps you kind of advocate to like administrators are gonna be like, all right, do my teachers like it and it works? We have evidence that it works. Like, all right, let's do it. And so I think those partnerships have opened a lot of doors.
Wonderful. And I did take a quick look through the chat, and it actually looks like you did such a wonderful job addressing our questions that a bunch of those topics were already dealt with as well. So I think we're probably good to say that we should be respectful of Dr. Bustamante's time and wrap up. And I just have 2 quick announcements. One is that there is a link to give feedback on our series in the chat. And I'm sure there's a way to send that off to folks that are in the room. And then our next CCF Spring Lecture Series is from our very own Elva Tang on Friday, April 21st at 9:30 in this room here and also online. So if we can just take a moment to thank Dr. Bustamante with sharing his wonderful research and his expertise with us, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you all. It's really fun to chat, and yeah, please don't hesitate to get in touch if you want to do. So I saw in the chat somebody said we need to do this in Houston, or was it in Dallas?
Dallas, come to Dallas.
Dallas.
Listen, there's already interest. There's already a lot of interest, and you can tell how excited I am of opportunities to continue working together with Dr. Bustamante. And I get to see him every 2 weeks, so that's great. And we hope to bring him back here literally, and not when he's traveling all over the country in the month of April, and spend more time together. So thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank
this
you.
was fun.
All right, take care.